I just want to go through it quickly and give each one of you a chance to just pick one thing that you feel is a challenge that we should overcome, and then say something about what you feel is the best thing we can do right now to try to mitigate it.
Well, as someone who's outside this field, I think the challenge I'm really in touch with is how hard it is to take the safety concerns emotionally seriously, and how hard it is for people in the field to do that as well. I can't tell you how many people outside this room who purport to be experts think the control problem is a total non-issue. It's flabbergasting to meet these people, and therefore not worth thinking about. And one of the reasons I think is that in the one case there's this illusion that the time horizon matters. If you feel that this is 50 or 100 years away, that is totally consoling, but there's an implicit assumption there. The assumption is that you know how long it will take to build this safely, and that 50 or 100 years is enough time. The other issue is I think most people feel like intelligence is an intrinsic good, and of course we want more of it, and it's very easy to be in touch with that assumption because right now there's a cure for cancer, which we have not discovered. Right? How galling is that? But for more intelligence, but for knowing which experiments to run or how to integrate the data we already have in hand, we would have a cure for cancer that was actionable now, unless there was some physical law of the universe that prevented us from curing cancer, which seems unlikely. So the pain of not having enough intelligence is really excruciating when you focus on it. But and I think to your previous question of doing this quickly becomes an intrinsic good, provided we have solved the alignment problems and the political problems and the chaos that would follow if we were just if we did it quickly without solving those problems. So I think it's the thing that is alarming is how ethereal these concerns are, even to those who have no rational argument against them.
So Sam, it sounds to me like you're agreeing very strongly with what Shane Legg said, that there is, in some circles, there's still the strong taboo that, don't even consider the possibility that we might get AGI because it's just absolutely ridiculous. And he was arguing that if the sooner we can get rid of this taboo, the sooner people can get to work and find all these really helpful solutions and answers that we need. So suppose for a moment that I came up to you and I said to you, this idea of superhuman intelligence just sounds absolutely ridiculous. It sounds completely nuts. And by the way, I've never seen your TED Talk. And we're in an elevator. You have only 30 seconds to persuade me to take this more seriously. What would you say? And a lot of people who are here will have this exact conversation with colleagues and others in the future.
Well, there are very few assumptions you need to make to take this seriously intellectually. Again, the emotional part is a separate piece. But if you assume that intelligence is just on some level the product of information processing in a physical system, and there are very few people who dispute that who are scientifically literate at this point, and you assume that we will continue to improve our information processing systems unless something terrible happens to us to prevent that, and that seems like a very safe assumption, then it is just a matter of time before we instantiate something that is human level and beyond in our computers. And again, the time horizon is only consoling on the assumption that we know we have enough time to solve the alignment problems and the political problems that we got. The other thing that's humbling here that Ray brought up at one point is that even if we were handed a perfectly benign, well-behaved AI just from God, we're given a perfect oracle, we're given a perfect inventor of good technology, given our current political and economic atmosphere, that would produce total chaos. We just we don't have the ethical or political will to share the wealth. We don't have the political integration to deal with this thing being given to Silicon Valley and not being given at the same moment to China or Iran. So there's just it's it's alarming that the best case scenario currently, basically just ripping out 80% of Nick's book because we've solved all those problems, is still a terrifying one. And so clearly that's a near-term thing that we have to solve.
Thank you, Sam. So Demis, do you want to tell us about one thing that you feel is a challenge and say something about what we should focus on now to
I think
tackle it?
I think it's, I agree with both statements already said that. So I think the coordination problem is one thing where, we want to avoid this sort of harmful race to the finish where, corner cutting starts happening and things like safety are easy things to the things that'll get cut because obviously they don't necessarily directly contribute to AI capability. In fact, they may hold it back a bit by making a safe AI. So I think that's going to be a big issue on a global scale. And it seems like that's going to be a hard problem when we're talking about national governments and things. And I think also, we haven't thought enough about the whole governance scenario of how do we want those AIs to be out in the world, how many of them, and how will they, who will set their goals, all these kinds of things, I think needs a lot more thought, once we've already solved the technical problems.
There are three overlapping revolutions that people talk about: GNR, genetics, biotech, nanotechnology, and robotics, which is AI. And there are proposals. There was the Cellmark conferences done here decades ago for biotech that have worked fairly well. There are similar proposals for nanotechnology. There's a difference with AI in that there really isn't a foolproof technical solution to this. You can have technical controls on, say, nanotechnology. One of the guidelines is it shouldn't be self-replicating. It's not really realistic because it can't scale to meaningful quantities without being self-replicating. But you can imagine technical protections. If you have an AI that's more intelligent than you and it's out for your destruction or it's out for the world's destruction and there's no other AI that's superior to it, that's a bad situation. So that's the specter. And partly this is amplified by our observation of what we as humans, the most intelligent species on the planet, have done to other species. If we look at how we treat animals, people, are very like their dogs and pets, but if you look at factory farming, we're not very benign to species that are less intelligent than us. That engenders a lot of the concern we see, that if there's a new type of entity that's more intelligent than us, it's going to treat us like we've treated other species. So that's the concern. I do think what we're doing at this conference is appropriate. I wanted to mention that I think we should publish these guidelines the way the Cellmark guidelines in biotech were published decades ago, and then you can have an opt-in, opt-out, but I think we should actually say we had this conference and the AI leadership community has come up with these guidelines and people can respond to them and debate them, and then maybe at the next conference we'll revise them. The Cellmark biotech guidelines have been revised many times, but I would advocate we actually take a stand and put forth these guidelines and then let the whole community at large debate them and have them guide our research. It's actually worked quite well in biotech.
Well, I've been trying to think of what is an actual good future? What does that actually look like? Or at least bad, or how you want to characterize it. Because to a point that was made earlier, I think maybe by Sam and maybe by others, that we're headed towards either superintelligence or civilization ending. Those like the two things that are that'll happen. Intelligence will keep advancing. The only thing that would prevent it from advancing is something that puts civilization into stasis or destroys civilization. So then we have to figure out what is a world that we would like to be in, where there is this digital superintelligence. I think And then another point that I think is really important to appreciate is that all of us already are cyborgs. So you have a machine extension of yourself in the form of your phone and your computer and all your applications. You are already superhuman. But by far, you have more power, more capability than the President of the United States had 30 years ago. If you have an internet link, you have an oracle of wisdom. You can communicate to millions of people. You can communicate to the rest of Earth instantly. These are magical powers that didn't exist not that long ago. So everyone is already superhuman and a cyborg. The limitation is one of bandwidth. So we're bandwidth constrained, particularly on output. So our input is much better, but our output is extremely slow. If you want to be generous, you could say maybe it's a few hundred bits per second or a kilobit or something like that output. The way we output is like we have our little meat sticks that we move very slowly and push buttons or tap a little screen. And that's just extremely slow. Compare that to a computer which can communicate at the terabit level. These are very big orders of magnitude differences. Our input is much better because of vision. But even that could be enhanced significantly. I think that the two things that are needed for a future that we would look at and conclude is good, most likely, is we have to solve that bandwidth constraint with a direct neural interface. I think a high bandwidth interface to the cortex, so that we can have a digital tertiary layer that's more fully symbiotic with the rest of us. Like we've got the cortex and the limbic system, which seem to work together pretty well. They've got good bandwidth, whereas the bandwidth to our digital tertiary layer is weak. So I think if we can solve that bandwidth issue, and then AI can be widely available. AI, the analogy to nuclear bomb is not exactly correct. It's not as though it's going to explode and create a mushroom cloud. It's more like if there were just a few people that had it, they would be able to be essentially dictators of Earth, or whoever acquired it, and if it was limited to a small number of people, and it was ultra smart, they would have dominion over Earth. So I think it's extremely important that it be widespread and that we solve the bandwidth issue. And if we do those things, then it will be tied to our consciousness, tied to our will, tied to the sum of individual human will, and everyone would have it. So it would be sort of still a relatively even playing field. In fact, it would be probably more egalitarian than today.